Mike McCool here. I'm in the Royal Examiner studio, and with me today is Congressman Ben Cline. Thank you, Ben, for coming into our studio on a Saturday afternoon. Ben was over at the Republican Party pig roast that we had over at the VFW grounds, and it had a good turnout.
It did.
And the candidates showed up, which is always good. It's good for the troops.
Yep, we had several statewide candidates for this year and potentially next year, and everybody, Virginia is for lovers of campaigns.
Of course.
So never too many campaigns running around.
Well, Virginia is an important state in the federal scheme of things for the election. I think, it's going to be a pivotal point, I think, again this year in the election. And
yeah, it's, Virginia is full in Northern Virginia of a lot of federal employees who are not fans of the president, and so it's going to be tough for President Trump to win Virginia in November. But Mark Warner is running for re-election to the U.S. Senate, and Daniel Gade, who's a double Purple Heart recipient and wonderful guy, great story, and he's running against Mark Warner. So you never can tell what's going to happen.
Well, it'll be interesting in the statewide Senate race between Warner and Kane. The Democrats have held those seats for quite a few years, and I think we have some good candidates that will stand up. And like you say, Dan has really served his country and showed that he's a fighter.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what we need in the Senate. We need fighters, and not somebody that just wants to. What would you call, oppose whatever it throws out. I get the press releases from the Warner-Kane campaigns. They're always hooked together.
Right.
And I keep telling their representative, I said, send me stuff that they've done. Don't send me the stuff that's stopped Trump from doing this, stopped Trump from doing that, because it's not, nothing happens.
Well.
And so, I notice I get some flack now. I'll tell you that I do send out your updates that you send us.
Oh, good.
Because it says, I'm Ben Cline, this is what I've been doing.
Right.
And I've done this, and we've done this, and I met with this person.
Those are official.
And if Warner would send me the same thing, I would publish that.
Right.
But one out of about every 10 is something that we can publish. And it's not because I won't support Democrats. I'll support both sides. Mm-hmm. But you have to give me something and I do appreciate the way that you keep your constituents in information, and you tell them what's going on, and your staff is really good at doing that, and you can see you're out in the 6th district working for us.
Well, I worked for Bob Goodlatte for almost a decade, and definitely learned a lot from him, and he valued constituent service above all else. And
he did. Every time he came through Front Royal, he stopped in to see me. So
that's good.
And he could remember your name. He must have a Rolodex. I want to stop. Who do I got to see? But he took the time to do it, and I think that's important. For people to do it, and that's what we're trying to do that as well.
Well, I've got the advantage because your name is on yard signs all around this town, so I can remember your name easily, Mike. But
I haven't seen many of your signs around here.
Well, you're going to see more of them.
All right, let's talk about a couple issues. Let's start first of all with the COVID response of in our state and states around the country, because we're seeing our economy start to come back. And I can see it in our own business here. We've had we had our greater than our 20% loss that we had with our CARES funding. So we've dropped over 50%. So now we're up. Maybe we're at 60 or 70% now, or up. So we're seeing orders come in and people starting to go back to business. But
good.
What's your feeling on this? Are we going to have that sharp V?
Yes, in part because Trump primed the economy before COVID by slashing federal regulations and getting federal government out of a lot of areas where the Obama administration had really created a thicket of regulations. And so now businesses are taking off again without that regulatory burden keeping them down, and you're seeing them come back faster. And that's great. We can still do business and maintain social distance. We're maintaining social distance and being safe, but at the same time, the economy does need to come back, and people need to go back to work, which is why it's important for local governments to send their kids to school as well.
Exactly. I've got some comments. Well, we're going to stay home till it's safe. Then my comment is, well, you want to go to Walmart and buy your groceries, and you want your electric on, you want the water to come on. Who's doing all that?
That wasn't why the governor initiated the shutdowns across the country. It was to keep our healthcare system from being overwhelmed. And we succeeded in that. And now the idea is keep the vulnerable population safe, but get everybody else back to work.
What do you think about the CDC's new data? They've finally collected the data, and they're sharing it, where only 6% of the deaths had no underlying conditions. I mean, that's a big change from 180,000 deaths to 9,600 deaths.
Well, it's exactly what I was pointing out, is that the vulnerable populations, the ones with more than two comorbidities, I've had to learn how to pronounce that word. Those are the ones who you have to make sure to keep safe, because they're the ones who are getting sick and dying from COVID. So that statistic bears that out.
It is. I was looking at the Florida numbers where they're showing that the average age of those groups was 93 years old.
Wow.
So, it's proven. The data is starting to come out now, but we're starting to see the extremes seem like to go, instead of coming towards the middle, they seem to be going farther left and right. You have the complete, pandemic group, and then you have I got to stay home until it's safe group, which could be, it's never safe.
Right.
It's just we have to weigh
right
where we feel we're at.
Yep.
So has our governor done a good job, or you think he's just doing the best he can do considering the circumstances?
He has not done a good job, and I'll leave it at that. I mean, we were last in testing at one point because the administration had done such a terrible job of making those efforts to outreach to those testing companies to get the resources they needed. And so that was just one example of how this governor has not done a good job. And I'm looking forward to electing a Republican governor next year.
Well, that's good. Back in '68, I was in Mississippi in the military, going to tech school. We had Hurricane Camille, and then you had Katrina, and I know Bush did, and Trump's got a lot of grief over the federal government not doing enough help. But a lot of these are, and kind of like these disasters in FEMA, they're standing there ready to go, and these governors and mayors are saying, like, they're holding them back. I mean, the federal government just can't come in and take over.
Right.
So I don't know if people realize that. The president can only do so much. Is that correct? Or
there's a federal responsibility, and when it became clear that this pandemic was something needed to be responded to immediately, Congress acted immediately. The president acted before Congress by stopping flights from China. And before, while Nancy Pelosi was obsessed with impeachment and telling people that it's safe to go down into San Francisco and enjoy a meal, and you had the mayor of New York saying, come to New York and go to the theater.
Sure.
This president was taking action to stop the virus from spreading, and Congress then appropriated funds to the CDC and other places to start researching for a vaccine. The CARES Act kept our economy from crashing by keeping businesses afloat and encouraging them to keep their employees hired so they didn't go off on unemployment, which spiked and would have been 10 times that high if we hadn't had the CARES Act, and making sure that those folks who were laid off had that $1,200 to get them where they needed to be, and a little bit extra on the unemployment. So the federal government was operating on all cylinders, and he was leaving to the governors those responsibilities that should be led by the states. And I think the president acted appropriately, and that's why we see the numbers coming down the way we have.
And when the governors do ask, I see the federal government is right there on the spot. They don't seem to, like they're waiting at the border to come in. I mean, to do that, and they've helped. And finally, some even the Democratic governors have relented and have asked for help.
Right.
And you're seeing that in the wildfires and the civil unrest that we have in some of these cities.
Right. And I mean, the wildfires, California had such poor management of its forests, and the amount of dead wood that was on the ground in those forests was just a tinder waiting to be lit.
Right.
So
And people have never been into the forest and understand management of these forestry things.
Right.
They don't really understand it. They live in the city their whole life. But you're right. It's just like it's a tinder keg.
right.
So what about the civil unrest? Is that something that we think is going to go away? Is it going to happen? Is it like the day after the election? Will it get worse or will it get better?
I hear the Democrats almost warning that if the public doesn't embrace Joe Biden, that they will continue to try and burn and loot and riot, and that kind of proves the point that they are doing this for a lot of it for political reasons. We definitely support people's right to protest and express their First Amendment rights, and in those instances where you had tragedies like George Floyd, like Breonna Taylor, we want to see changes. And so, I've supported legislation at the federal level to make sure that we hold bad cops accountable, that we make sure that there is transparency, that there is accountability. But that's only 1%, and you have 99% great cops, and we have to make sure that we maintain the rule of law, and that when folks are destroying property, acting in a way that is actually assaulting people, that those people are held accountable, and that the rule of law applies, and we back our police and we stand with our law enforcement. That's what's most important coming out of this.
I notice the president always says, without law, you don't have a country. And,
Right.
and a lot of truth in that. And like you go back to the protesting, if it was just local people protesting local issues, but we're finding out that a lot of these protesters are on the bus and get a paycheck and go from city to city to do this. And that doesn't sound like protesting to me. That sounds like mob rule or something.
Well, there are some groups out there that are raising a lot of money, that are acting in the shadows. They're not complying with IRS. They're not, filing
Sure,
taxes and things
exactly.
like that. But
The IRS will get them. That's
well, I have heard how much some of these groups are raising online, and they are hiring people and they are paying people to go from city to city, and so it's something that the Justice Department needs to be focused on. We do have statutes that are targeted just for that kind
Sure.
of activity. So hopefully our Attorney General's on top of things.
That's right. Speaking of statues, what do you think of all these statue removals?
Statutes, but
Statutes, I know, but it
but
was close.
statues, okay. Out here in our beautiful part of Virginia, we have a rich and glorious history, and we need to tell it all, good and bad. So I'm not for cancel culture. I don't believe we should just roll up the carpet and put it away. We need to just tell the whole story, and so that's the way I feel about that.
Well, that's like, most of the interviews I see with you are sound bites. We don't do that here. We're going to put the whole thing
Yeah.
from start to finish, because then
Yeah.
you can form your own opinion.
That's right.
But I have heard comments, Nancy Pelosi, the question is, why did it take you 34 years to be offended? You walk by those statues every day.
Right.
And I read on that each state has a right to put 2 statues at the Capitol, and the states pick the statues they want for their own reasons of who is important for their state or not important, or whoever they want to do. So it seems like it's a states' rights issue, not a federal. I mean, they pick the statues, whoever they are, and they're there. And,
Right.
And like I said, it's taken 34 years for you to become offended. I don't understand that thinking there.
And the rules have been in place for so long. They were set up when the old House chamber stopped being used, and they built the new House wing. I think that was right around the Civil War, right around the time Abraham Lincoln was president, and I think he was involved in signing the law that set up the contributions of the states. Every state gets to put 2
Sure.
statues in Statuary Hall, leaving it to the states to make that decision. Nancy Pelosi decides she knows better than Abraham Lincoln, apparently, and wants to take statues out willy-nilly. Virginia was following the rules, had voted to swap out a statue for the Lee statue, and they were going through a process of deciding which individual statute that would be. That's the state's rights.
They can do that if that's what the state decides,
that the
right?
law allows for, not
Right.
giving Pelosi the right to do that by herself.
Well, I was going to ask you about, I hear rumors that there's some Democrats trying to get rid of Nancy Pelosi, but we won't go there.
Well,
any truth to that? I think they're always.
They don't tell me that they're secret strategies, but
Wouldn't surprise you?
It wouldn't surprise me because, well, AOC had a protest outside her office before she was even sworn in, or right
Right.
after she was sworn in.
Right.
She's been brought into the circle, and so
Yeah,
now
yeah.
she agrees that Nancy's doing a great job, and it's the moderates now who are upset that she will not deal on this COVID assistance. People out there hurting. We want to
Right.
get people assistance. Nancy Pelosi won't agree to compromise. She insists on her $3 trillion bill, and that's keeping that assistance from people.
Let's touch on Second Amendment, because that is a federal issue, but it's also been driven down to the local areas. Like here in Front Royal, the council has made a resolution that we would be a Second Amendment sanctuary city. But now we know we're going to get some influence from the state, and I've been asked questions. What are we going to do about that? What's your feeling on why our cities feel like they need to? I mean, they really feel threatened on the Second Amendment.
They do, and they do with good reason, because the folks running Richmond right now are Northern Virginia liberal, left-wing individuals who want to take as many guns as possible, are already moving to reinstitute one gun a month limits, want to reinstitute limitations on types of firearm purchases. And fortunately, there are one or two moderates left in the state Senate, or semi-moderate, who agree that that's not a good idea. But that's only temporary, and hopefully what we'll see is reassertion of our constitutional liberties. Out here in our area, folks are concerned, and it's great that folks are expressing their First Amendment rights at their local level, because that's the most accessible. And so what you have are local boards of supervisors wanting to weigh in, and the best way to do that is to adopt a resolution which is non-binding, which doesn't have the
Sure.
rule of, the weight of law, that just says we support the Second Amendment rights of the citizens of this community, and so I think that's a great expression. Now, the legal aspects are separate and definitely complex. And being a Dillon Rule state, we have certain activities that the localities can do and certain activities that the state can do, and so that's best left to the lawyers. But from the federal level, we're glad we have a president who stands up for our Second Amendment rights. We have a Senate that has stopped the gun control efforts of the House, and I've continued to stand against those measures when they come up.
Another, speaking of something that is not really a federal issue, but a state issue at the moment, and I think it does affect you, and that's this amendment that's on our ballot this year on, I call it gerrymandering, but drawing the district lines.
Right.
Well, that's congressional district, so I guess you would be affected by that. So what is? It sounds like they just want to have an independent board to do it and take the politicians out of it. Is that kind of the summary?
Yes, and what I've always said, and I've voted against taking the power of redistricting away from the legislature in the past, because I represented the people as the delegate from Rockbridge, and the best way to hold me accountable is for the voters to vote me out. And for redistricting, if they, you want that redistricting power kept with a group that is accountable to the people. So I had voted against it in the past. This is a commission made up of legislators largely. It does have some citizen appointees, but because it keeps it in the legislature and the product has to come back to the legislature for a vote, I think it's an acceptable compromise that I can support. So I hope it will pass. I do think it will take some of the partisanship out. You see the Democratic Party weighing in no, flip-flopping,
Sure.
and saying now, oh wait, we do want the power to draw the districts.
When they're in power, they want
Right.
it one way. When they're out of power, they want it another way.
And hypocrisy.
Well, we
knows
have
no limits.
I think that's what's happened in Warren County. We have 3 delegates.
Right.
In one sense, we don't have any delegate.
Oh,
but you know,
in another sense, you have three.
I have three.
Three
So
people working for you.
If you have three really good delegates, which I
Right.
know we do,
Right.
they work for you. But we could just as easily had three delegates not working for us. And
True.
so no, there's not enough votes in Warren County for any one delegate to hold them accountable in our county.
There's only there was one gentleman from Warren. It was Clay Athey. And I served with him, and I used to regard him as such. And now you have delegates from other places
Right.
who represent portions of Warren.
Right.
But,
I mean, that's because we've grown.
that's right. That's right. That's right.
But I always kid them. I said, well, you know, which delegate? People don't know who their delegate is. But you know, but we've had some good ones. I see your roommate.
Michael Weber or Chris Collins.
Chris Collins.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been moved up into. I
Yeah.
figured the Democrats did that because he's too strong at the state level. What do you think?
He'll make a great judge.
He will make a great judge. He has a lot of background, I think, for that being. I think he's a police officer and
Loves
he's a
the
lawyer,
law.
and he does love the law. Let's speak of the law. Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
We now have a vacancy on the Supreme Court. What say you on that?
Well, we're praying for the family of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Her death yesterday was, her health had been failing, but it's still a shock, and so she was a trailblazer, that's for sure.
She was a fighter, though. I
She
tell you
was.
what, whether you agree with her or not, but she really stood her ground on some things.
Yep, and definitely for women in the law, just moved the bar and championed equality, and so now we look backward, we remember, but we also look forward, and we see what's going to happen, and we've already heard from both the president and the majority leader in the Senate, and the House is out of it. So the president has said he will nominate. The Senate majority leader has said they will vote. And so now it's up to the individual senators, and you have some who say we should wait, but most, I think, will agree that the Constitution gives the responsibility to the Senate. It doesn't qualify it. It doesn't limit it. It doesn't say within 60 days of an election you shall not. It just
Right.
says you shall vote on and confirm the Supreme Court appointments.
So if they have enough nerve to do that, they'll go forward with
Right.
it. Well, the president's given a list. I mean, who's ever done that?
This president has been very forward with his choices for the Supreme Court, put out options and opportunities, and I think that helps him. He's been pushing Joe Biden to do the same thing, and Joe Biden's been reluctant, and that is telling as well. It ought to be of concern to people that Joe Biden is hiding his preferred choices for the Supreme Court out of concern that they will not be in the mainstream, that they will evoke a negative reaction from the public. So I think that should be a telling issue for people as they go to the polls.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. This is a very powerful election. I think our government's at a transition, both locally, state, and federal as well. So I think it's an important thing for people to get out and to vote.
Absolutely.
We can actually start voting today. I mean, as
Yes,
of
I voted yesterday.
Did you vote?
I did.
So, there's not any excuse for not voting. There's no hindrance to vote. I know we've had a lot of, especially the Democrats lately have really been pushing this, no ID card to vote. You can't get a library card. You can't even use your driver's license to get a library card in here. I don't know if you've known that or not. You got to have 3 forms of identification to get a library card.
Right.
So, I mean.
We have very secure election systems in Virginia. But that's not a permanent situation. It can be undone, and what the Democrats are trying to do is inject certain changes to the system that bring about more uncertainty. So not having to have a photo ID to vote, same-day registration, when you combine it with same-day registration, you're going to have close races in Virginia that are going to go past Election Day, and now that you have these drop boxes, whether they're being secured across the Commonwealth or not, watched 24/7
Sure.
and free from tampering, that's another question that's being raised. So our secure systems up until now are not guaranteed to be secure going forward. We just have to make sure that the public demands that we make them as secure as possible.
Well, I'll go back to that voting without an ID. People, you can't vote. You can vote without an ID. It's called a provisional ballot.
have a provisional
and
ballot.
when they verify it, they'll count your vote.
That's right.
So really, I can't understand why people are being hindered from voting. I never could buy into that. I mean, you can get an absentee.
No excuse
they'll mail it.
absentee is fine, and absentee has worked
For
years in
For
Virginia.
years. We
I have
voted in the military. I voted absentee for quite a few years because, so it can be done.
Virginia will have, hopefully we will have secure results on election night this year.
Do you think we'll have a result election night, or at least a call? I know we'll have a call, but are we going to have? Will the popular vote be counted before the Electoral College meets?
Well, Jim Jordan said it best. The Democrats are trying to decide the election after the election, and they don't want to decide it on election day. They want to amass their army of lawyers and sue and sue and sue until they get the outcome they want. And we saw that in 2000. They were pushing and pushing and pushing until the electors, the states had to report to to send their electors to the Electoral College, that the Supreme Court finally stepped in and said, you do have a deadline. And that hopefully will not happen again, because the country just won't stand for that kind of political games.
And people see it. They see through. I think both sides see through it. But again, we have these two extremists that are carrying this torch, so to speak, and it's a shame, really, that happens. But people have to remember it's the Electoral College that makes the decision.
Right.
You can win the popular vote by quite a bit and still lose.
Right.
And I think because, I tell people, I said, we'd have basically, 3 states determining who our president would be if we just went on the popular vote.
Exactly, and you'd never see a presidential candidate in states like Virginia. You'd never see an ad run in states like Virginia.
No.
They would just spend all their time in California and New York, Texas.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
But hopefully our forefathers had some, weren't as
They
dumb
were
as
smart.
people think they were.
They were
Amazing
very smart.
how intelligent those old guys were.
That's right.
Actually, they really weren't that old, were they?
No.
They were
weren't.
your age,
They
man.
were a lot. Yeah, they were somewhere younger. That's right.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule today. It's a Saturday. I know Ben has his daughter here with him, so we won't turn the camera on her because she'll be embarrassed.
We've had a great time.
But it's great to be around your family and include them in your activities. When I was, we traveled a lot. We lugged our kids. I can remember the very first time my son was born. 2 weeks later, we were in Florida, set the bassinet up at the convention, and
oh, wow.
all of them, the women just went, googly eye over babies.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So we've lugged them all around the world, and so
they've been campaigning with me for 8 years, and they're used to it. They always know they're going to end up with some dessert at some function somewhere.
It's always great. Again, Ben, good luck on your campaign. I know you're a hard worker for us. Again, you have some good background working the 10 years with Bob, and you've been in the state system for a lot of years, and I think you have a lot of good institutional knowledge that we really need in Washington, and carry our flavor of the Valley, and hopefully it'll rub off on some of those people down there.
Well, we're working hard to take the Valley values up to Washington, and hopefully we'll be able to keep that fight going after November 3rd.
We really appreciate it. Thanks again,
Thanks,
Ben.
Mike.